Oh sister, I know be your brider. Give me one chance, make I be a fighter, provider. Toto for my man, make I be a pasta. Meaning Jimuti, make I be a sponsor. When I
say Ghana Tech Summit, let's say Ghana Tech Summit. Ghana Tech Summit.
Yamena be me good to papa, and a penny is so at that side. Yamena be me good to papa. Yamena be me good to Bulali, get it, king.
Hi, I am Anne Rosenberg, Senior Vice President of SAP Next Gen. We are in Accra in Ghana, where we are launching the first huge Ghana Africa Future Tech Hub.
First and foremost, let me give you an overview of what Ghana Tech Summit is. This is a 12-year initiative that we're going to be doing every single year until 2030. And we started it today with a bold initiative, with 100 global speakers for the next 2 days, 1,000 attendees. Some of them will be coming on African time, and it's okay, right?
The energy is incredible out here. People are excited. There's a lot of galvanization towards the same goal. And I think what's very interesting is how the diaspora from other countries have come back to Ghana to plow back and develop the ecosystem.
Meeting a lot of great entrepreneurs and a lot of great companies and learning about what technology and advancement in Ghana looks like.
Well, we have incredible minds. They say that Ghanaian migrants are some of the sharpest people across the US and the UK, and thus when that happens we can actually have accelerated growth. So with that, Ghana could actually become one of the dominant tech hubs in Africa in the next 5-10 years.
We have to reach the 17 global goals by 2030. It means that every day we drive innovation. It means that companies are opening up, building joint innovation labs with collaboration between accelerator, academia, and the industry and the public sector.
One of the big conversations there was blockchain and AI, and we're literally sitting right here in Accra, where Google is going to be opening their AI office, and I think that for me that's the immediate link. These are technologies that could possibly help us eradicate poverty, eradicate malaria, eradicate all sorts of issues that we're still dealing with as a developing nation. So for me, I think that that's what's exciting about this.
So one thing is for sure, we're doing history here. This is the first summit in Ghana on tech, and it's going to be many more to come. So if you visit this year, we hope to see you next year. Don't forget Cannes Lions first, and then we go to Ghana Tech Summit.
But this world, as big as it is, one person can be the tipping scale to really create a domino effect that no one ever seen coming. I would like to remind people, there's going to be a lot of people that's going to judge you and tell you you're too naive.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ghana Tech Summit Stakeholder Roundtable Dialogues. It's a pleasure to welcome you once again, and we say warm welcome to all our Ghana Tech Summit ecosystem. I know it's been a while you had updates, and we're excited about this new update as well. This Ghana Tech Summit Stakeholder Roundtable Dialogue is a monthly series that will bring together leaders, influencers, and ecosystem builders from all over the country and also within the diaspora as well. And it's supposed to galvanize and mobilize the Ghanaian community towards a more prosperous future for Ghana. We'll be discussing everything about the tech ecosystem as well. The theme for this discussion today is Ghana's emerging tech ecosystem. And this is going to be a dynamic discussion where we would have leaders, influencers, and ecosystem builders within Ghana and the global scene to help foster collaboration and drive impactful change, thereby creating a platform for deep discussion on innovative pathways towards Ghana's prosperous future. We hope that these discussions will be a rallying point for forward-thinking Ghanaians and allies, focusing on mobilizing resources, knowledge, and support across the sectors to unlock the country's full potential. So stay with us as we shape a cohesive vision for Ghana's next chapter, one dialogue at a time. For the discussion today, I have two esteemed gentlemen, both of them called Patrick, coincidentally. So you have Patrick Stevenson, who's an economic consultant and advisory board member of the Africa Center for Digital Transformation. We also have Patrick Watson, who is the group chief executive of CORI. I'll be interested to you'll be seeing them shortly, whilst we as we get ready to delve into the discussion that we have for today. Before we kickstart this discussion, we'll take a brief break to take some a recap video of previous editions of the Ghana Tech Summit.
So my vision for Ghana Tech Summit is to help cement Ghana to become an international tech hub by 2030.
Take the shackles off my feet. Make I go, make I go. It's a battle with the beast. Take your shield, here we go. Kwame Nkrumah take over. New Africa makeover. Let's bow our heads and pray, your Lord. Our Father, help us fight the war. Refuge, 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 now you can walk. Refuge, 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 now you can walk. In Africa, but a black man in America, African in England. Don't forget where you are from.
400 years ago, that's why 2019 is dubbed the year of return. And it's a time for us to now change the narrative about Africa.
Please don't shoot me, we are one. Refuge, 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 now you can walk. Refuge, 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 now you can walk. Refuge, 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 now you can walk. Refuge, 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 now you can walk.
Now have a look through history's binoculars.
Welcome to Ghana Tech Summit 2019.
We should be in a world where literally the opportunities that they need to help thrive and survive and do well is available for them where they are right now. My goal is for us to create a new future for Africa, right? One where we are self-sufficient, where we have all that we need wherever we are. It's because we do have it all in many ways.
Every ecosystem is quite unique based on their location.
We need to build institutions that equip these individuals with the ability for them to do certain things in our ecosystem backed by tech.
People also need to be able to choose their mentors carefully.
When you change the way you see things, the things that you see change.
You're going to be seeing the next most innovative companies in the world coming from Africa.
The women are starting to work together. They are supporting each other, and a lot of men are becoming allies of these women.
Advances in technology and business are changing how and where we work.
Can you start by what are your pro tips? What are your favorite? As an insider knowing the network.
It is a business context. You're going there to build your brand as a business person.
The one big thing, never give up.
It's really a 360 degree on how you can improve yourself on a personal, professional level, which is what LinkedIn is all about.
These three things, the problem you solve, your solution in your market, that's all you need to know.
We need to ensure that the global workforce that we're building should be project-based and competency-based teaching.
Welcome back, and it's been an amazing journey so far for the Ghana Tech Summit, and we'll now kickstart our panel discussion. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to this Stakeholder Roundtable dialogue. My name is Daniel, I'm Ecosystem Development Lead at the Global Startup Ecosystem, and it's my pleasure to come away with this Stakeholder dialogue. Joining me today for this discussion, we would have Patrick Quantin, Patrick Quantin will be joining us shortly, as well as Patrick Stevenson. Patrick Quantin is the Group Chief Executive at Cowrie, and Patrick Stevenson, who is an economic consultant and advisory board member of Africa Center for Digital Transformation. So it's a real pleasure to have these gentlemen here with us today. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's a
Pleasure to
have
be
you
here.
today.
Pleasure to be here. Apologies, my data is not the strongest. I'm in between two conferences. I'm parked in the hotel parking lot just to join this. So, yeah, but it's absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So, and welcome. So since you are both called Patrick, I'll be using your surnames to address you to avoid any confusion. Okay.
Sure, that works.
So, great. So I'll start with you, Mr. Stevenson. Kindly introduce yourself and share one thing that you or your organization is doing personally or as a group within the tech ecosystem in Ghana.
Ooh, that's an interesting one, and pleasure to be here. When the email came, it was a little nostalgic because I do recall having taken part in the very first, tech summit. And then the subsequent one, I think I was at the 2019 one as well. And somehow, I've been a bit of a prodigal child as far as the summit is concerned, but happy to have this conversation. So personally, I'm connected to the ecosystem from a policy standpoint. But I've also done some private consulting work for different actors that are doing different things in the value chain. So most of those sorts of engagements have been with ecosystem enablers and either philanthropic organizations that are trying to do things to expand access uh, to different innovators in the space. So I've done work for the UNDP in the space. Some work as well as also been connected to the efforts of the Mastercard Foundation through some other actors. But specifically at the Africa Center for Digital Transformation, what we're aiming to do as an organization is to find those sweet spots and levers, across the continent that can build pathways to unlock the digital economy in a manner that adds value, to the African economy, but also creates opportunities for young people, right? So issues of policy are there, issues of stakeholder consultations are there, connecting with, different financiers that are interested in different innovations, and work across a number of themes. So from AI and its relation to the new growth goals that I mentioned on the continent, to the connections between, creating sustainable energy systems and how digital economy sort of unlocks that. It's also an interesting area of our work. Yes, and we have civic responsibilities and duties that we equally play to the ecosystem as well. So I'll leave that there, and happy to respond to any questions around any of the focal areas I'm working around.
Great, great. Thank you for joining us today. I'll go to you, Mr. Quantum, as well. Same question. Introduce yourself and tell us what your organization is doing within the Ghana tech ecosystem.
Sure, thank you. As my name says on the screen, I'm Patrick George Quanson. I'm the group enabler of Cowrie across Ghana, also across Ivory Coast. We are rapidly expanding on the continent with the purpose of making financial services accessible and easy. And in Ghana, we are doing that for businesses and individuals, which is really, really important, because financial access is really at the nexus of the digital economy, in creating interactions either through payments, creating interactions either through loan, credit, working capital, revenue-based financing, insurance, investment, etc. It is extremely at the heart of it. And at Cowrie, we are building a financial services digital platform that then allows businesses, individuals to be able to access these financial services to describe them. In my day-to-day, I supervise the expansion of our franchise across the continent. As I said, we're in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. We have presence in Togo. We have presence in Guinea. We have presence in Zimbabwe. And we are fast expanding on the Francophone West African corridor, as well as the Southern African Development Bloc, which are the two biggest economic corporations in as far as the continent goes. Even though Cowrie is a 2.5-year startup, the antecedent of the company is from Dreamable. So at our core, we also offer consultancy. We offer digital transformation toolboxes. We make our platform available for a range of players, including other fintech collaborators, financial services organizations, and other key players in the technology sector, to be able to white label our platforms and also then be able to access our knowledge over the past 18 years running large-scale digital transformation programs on the continent. So thank you very much. Just a quick introduction of myself and Cowrie.
Okay, great. It's very interesting, and I'm sure we'll go more into what you do as we go along. Now, next, I want us to assess the current state of the tech ecosystem, because I believe for both of you, what you do is within the tech ecosystem in Ghana. So, how do you assess the current state of Ghana's tech ecosystem? Back to you, Mr. Stevenson.
Right. So perhaps we should take a bit of a step back to understand how the ecosystem itself has evolved over time. And my view really is that if we take a stock of where things started from, maybe as far back as 2008, we have seen a dramatic explosion and an improvement in the number of innovations and the opportunities and financiers that have gotten involved in the digital economy ecosystem. What that has done, and contrary to what may pertain elsewhere, policy that is supposed to support the activities in the ecosystem has been a bit lagging, right? And so that explosion from like 2008, as I did indicate, would touch several sectors. So from finance, away from finance, you had big ag, you had small ag, you had other value chains in the FMCG sector, for example, that the explosion touched. We had now you have a lot of things happening in the services sector, for example, that are all driven off of the development and innovations that happen in the ecosystem over the last maybe 15, 16 years. And so if you take that kind of a perspective, I think that you are likely going to come to a conclusion which suggests that the ecosystem or the digital economy is going to be a very important component. I wouldn't say new growth pole necessarily. Something has been around for almost 2 decades. Not necessarily new, but it's going to be one of the most important growth poles of the Ghanaian economy going forward. And that will happen for a number of reasons. One, it's driven efficiency across a number of value chains. I mean, you are hearing the example of Mr. Quanson there, for instance, around access to financial services. Gone are the days of brick and mortar banking, right? Now, the gap has significantly been bridged, even if you think of the financial services sector alone. If you think of ag, different actors that I've had the opportunity of working with are able to not only crowdsource solutions, but they're able to find mechanisms that they deliver either warehousing systems to support small-scale farmers. They're able to do things around agriculture at scale. They're able to connect people to markets that are not here. And even people in the urban centers are able to now farm primarily because of digital economy tools. And so some level of efficiency even around the traditional sectors of the economy, I think, look promising and will be promising going forward. And there are quite a number of innovators that you see in the space, and I think new things keep coming up. Outside of what somebody like Mr. Quantum is doing in the ecosystem, you may see an explosion and solutions that have come up with platforms like mobile money. Even though that itself is quite questionable, because those of us that have been in the ecosystem for a while saw the investments that small scale innovators had gone ahead to predict what that financial solution was going to look like and made significant investments in them before the big telcos came up and essentially ate their pie, right? But it tells you that the big guns see opportunities, and I think these are the opportunities I'm looking forward to seeing as further develop. Perhaps some things that when I look around today, we can better improve, that can better support the ecosystem going forward, will be things like provision of infrastructure. And I know we say these things, at different conversations and different round tables, but I think it's time we start narrowing down to those, the nooks and crannies that actually matters, and in my opinion, from a policy standpoint. So when you say something like, expanding access to internet access, reliable power supply in rural areas, most of these innovations are concentrated in urban centers, right? And if we have to drive them to scale, I think that it would make sense to think of infrastructure and not necessarily the tools that have been deployed on the front end. Some may say, we should equally reflect properly on policy frameworks that may support. When I say policy framework, it's not the elaborate things we write on papers. Again, we get tired of seeing those, but you think of things around tax incentives and what it means for the digital economy itself. I don't mean thinking about the whole economy as a whole, but if we see the digital economy as a new growth pole, what sorts of incentives are required? And there are different businesses in the value chain that have different needs, and so fiscal policy has got to unlock those needs specifically at that level. We can equally think about things like data protection and what those will mean in practice. Um, every now and then you hear people complain about things like losing money through platforms that even the big telcos are running. Then you can think of skill development, and I think on skill development, Ghana as a country compared to some of the others we have in the sub-region, we've done pretty well. Because again, once the businesses take the lead, you get a sense that the other pipelines for creating a human capital equally follows. Having said that, there's still a gap, right, that I think we can work around. And I know there are several innovation hubs that try to bridge this gap, but some of them require significant finance to support young and upcoming innovators and entrepreneurs. And this is why my earlier submission I was referring to some of the platforms and opportunities that I've had the opportunity of plugging and that have gone into the very remote areas to find your atypical innovators. So you have young, brilliant minds that are doing things from a technology standpoint and using tech to solve everyday problems, but they're in areas that don't have access to some of the basic infrastructure that connects them to market that I talked about. So I think I would think of policy from a standpoint that helps unlock these, whether infrastructure policy or skill training and development. I think that will make sense. And this perhaps I'll leave it there and see if Patrick has got something else that we're missing out on.
Okay, great. I do appreciate the background you gave concerning the boom in the ecosystem as well. I think it was something that we followed keenly at that time. There was a lot of excitement and buzz about it, and we are keen to see how some of these developments have gone, particularly within the finance sector. And that brings me to you, Mr. Quanson. What was your assessment of the tech ecosystem, particularly seeing the boom with financial technology that came in at the time? How would you make of this assessment?
Sure. I think it's everything that Patrick said. And to your point, it's such a really structured way of timelining the ecosystem. I think we are in the very early stage of maturity. I think if we do a deep lens analysis, we are at the very lower end of the maturity spectrum. And if you look at the ecosystem as a whole, indeed, there are certain parts that are moving really well. You said payments, you said fintech, etc. I think we are a reference point on the continent for mobile money, etc. At the same time, in that same financial services spectrum, we haven't done much around advancing perhaps the next level of exchanging value. We haven't done much in extending insurance. We haven't done much in extending accessible credits. So even though we've done well in payments, if we look at fintech generally, to the point, we are at the very early start of it. I think just like any maturing ecosystem, there are challenges that Patrick has said around regulatory policy, infrastructure, the economy itself, government policies, and the like. But at the same time as well, you see that despite that early stage of maturity, we are not scaling as fast compared to others if we timelined it. Okay. So for example, the tech ecosystem generally is struggling to access funds. And as an example, fintechs here are struggling to raise compared to other hubs versus growth. We are generally also seeing a low maturity of Ghanaian technology companies going into other markets and transposing the Ghana experience and this level of maturity across markets. You see that is beginning to happen, not as fast, but really beginning to happen. And you also see in terms of collaboration as well, that in certain instances we are quite insular and we are not sharing across critical areas that can endear general growth things like we're not sharing risk or fraud data in more open ways. We are very early stage yet in that maturity curve around KYC and identity, and ensuring that perhaps the joint customers we are servicing are identified properly, etc. So it's very early days here, but in that maturity curve. But at the same time, there are quite a lot of positive stories that then accentuate the maturity, and it's not just in financial services. We're seeing on the continent, I think perhaps even stronger innovation coming from agri-tech. We are seeing health tech. We are seeing edu-tech. Really wonderful things that are beginning to come out of the ecosystem away from fintech, and it's great to see. And I suspect that we're going to see even more maturity faster around these other aspects of the ecosystem than we've even experienced with payment and mobile money, etc. So that's my assessment. I think it's early stage of maturity, but it is in these conversations and in these gatherings that we accelerate the growth together even faster compared to some perhaps of our peers if you timeline that maturity growth. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And returning to you, Mr. Stevenson, with fintech and other sectors advancing, I know you touched on this a little bit, but what policy changes or initiatives do you think would help support digital innovation across Ghana, particularly in undeserved areas?
So that's an interesting question, right? Many time I've heard, the question of policy has come up. I mean, policy is one of those things that is very dear to me. Yeah. What can we do to help digital innovators? My view is going to be, and again, this is based on the fact that we have quite a number of innovators. I don't think Ghana as a country lacks the depth of innovators or innovation. I know different actors that have been involved in the space, and sometimes they check out, they exit, right? Whether they come in to do things on, digital transport systems or whatever value chain, even if the traditional economy that they get plugged in, some of them, because of these constraints I'm going to talk about, leave. So I'm not speaking about policy, carte blanche or policy from a point where we're not trying to build an ecosystem, right? Like, as a quantum would say, you are at a certain stage, and depending on what part of the digital economy you're looking at, policies got to respond differently. When I think about it that way, and I take, for example, the question around taxes, immediately the part of the value chain I go to will be startups, right? And usually, I think we've seen some efforts aimed at simplifying the processes by which tech startups get going. As to whether the real fiscal incentives to say, like we would give to maybe a company working in the free zone to say, okay, for 10 years you don't have to pay taxes. We've seen government efforts being a bit more conservative, and I think we can be a bit more ambitious when we think around that. So here, just all startups, all innovators, regardless of the value chain they're working, so long as the indigenous or the indigenous partnership component to it, is important for us to understand that they are not only creating solutions, but they're creating jobs. So it will make sense to provide those fiscal incentives. So that's going to be across board. The other thing, which I think we have done in the traditional sectors, which we can equally do, for the digital economy, particularly those that are equally set up along, whether it is ag tech, ed tech, or even, health tech, will be to find ways and provide additional fiscal incentives for those that are going into remote areas and providing solutions that solve problems that are innate to the remote areas. So if you take agriculture, for example, if you've got, say, like a Grow for Me or any of these ag-related, tech innovators that are operating in the ag value chain, if they are connecting and scaling up, say they are connecting and scaling up production of tomatoes, right, or some other products that they're connected, plugged into the export market, and they're based in, say, Aguna Kunyaku, for instance. Well, to the extent that behind the tech that has been deployed, there's a real solution to be provided to the people in Aguna Kunyaku. It will make sense to say, even if they scale beyond $1 million or $2 million, for the simple reason that they are solving this kind of a problem in that area, there's an additional 5%. And we have this in the traditional sector. So if you think of light manufacturing or processing, for example, depending on where you're located in the country, by the tax law, you have additional fiscal incentives that you get beyond what may pertain across board. And I think that when we imagine it this way, then the guy who's in ag tech, can innovatively think of possible areas and how they're going to deploy their solutions on the supply side in a manner that that works. Beyond that kind of approach, I would imagine that the bottlenecks for formalization of their operations equally needs to be addressed. I think that sometimes when we have thought of the business of formalizing the informal sector of the economy, the thinking has always been to lump all businesses together to say we have simplified registration processes, and so that's that. Get a good score on the doing business report. No, you've got very peculiar needs, and on that score, I would imagine that the innovation hubs sometimes try to provide solutions that take off the burden of formalizing their operations. And I do, in the earlier submission, you had Mr. Kwanson, for example, talk about challenges that still exist in the ecosystem regarding access to finance and the like. It may not necessarily be the result of formalization, but I think that to a large extent, the cost of getting business done has got to go close to the bare minimum, if possible. Perhaps the final thing that I'll say, from a policy, and it sounds as if I'm asking government to just give out things, right? That perhaps is not what I'm getting. I'm not saying we should hand over, things in bits and pieces. I think that there's significant value to be unlocked in that value chain side. That the government doesn't always have to give out things like in taxes. So if you understand the Ghanaian economy very well today, the purchasing power of government is almost about 60% of the size of the economy. What does that mean? It means that if we want to deploy anything to a point that it's able to scale on its own, more often than not, the government as a first mover, a first buyer, makes sense. What I find strange is more often than not, the government getting in the space, and rather than using its purchasing power to unlock value for the ecosystem actors, begins to play a role. I mean, not too long ago, a couple of days this week, I've seen about 2 or 3 different platforms that have been launched, centrally by government. One is in the transport sector, so Quasar, like another form of a state-run Uber, or we don't need that. What we can do is to say, who are the innovators that are doing things in agriculture, okay? And then say, for example, that the government has got for the last 6-7 years, we run this, subsidy program that is providing at scale fertilizers and other inputs to small-scale farmers. So who are the ag tech innovators that can deploy a solution that enables us to lock the supply onto the right, farms in a manner that we're able to use, geospatial data to properly determine what yields and things like that are going to look like. That, on a very good day, when I've looked at the budget for that for about the last 7-8 years, we're running into almost 12 billion cedis. No, 2 billion cedis, right? 2 billion cedis is no chicken change. You wouldn't expect that, a young startup will be able to generate demand at that value. But if the demand is directed by way of policy, and you even crowdsource 3 or 4 different solution providers, this can add significant value. So I guess the final point I'm making is from a policy standpoint, using the size of government to unlock demand, whether it's in ag, it's in ed tech, or it's even in health tech, doing that to actually deliver the solution. I think that's the best way perhaps we can optimize policy for the ecosystem.
Okay, great. Thank you. And interesting insights there as well. I'd like to now, to you, Mr. Quantin, looking at growth strategy, right? What do you think Ghana's tech industry can do to attract investment? within investment and also build sustainable partnerships, particularly with the diaspora and the global market as a whole?
Sure, thank you for that. That again is quite a heavily loaded question. But I think a number of things that we must begin to think of very, very differently. I think one is in collaborations and partnerships. As I said earlier, the ecosystem is not maturing, in my view, in the right direction towards that. I think that given the size of our market and given certain very specific exogenous risk and impact, we must collaborate a bit more intentionally and deliberately. In some instances, going into mergers and acquisitions. As an example, there are close to over 51 fintechs for our total addressable market, where there's a dominant player like an MTN. So you can imagine, really, if you were to do an analysis of who was doing, volumes of transactions within this 51, etc., how we are all faring, etc., right? So I think that we must begin to see some consolidation towards really intentional ends. Okay. And for me, one of the intentional ends, as I said, is we must begin to see Ghanaian businesses cross carpet and go into Ivory Coast, go into Togo, go into Burkina Faso, and begin to look at the regional blocks as one total addressable market. Because for a lot of the tech industry, or for a lot of the tech business cases, it's really in the unit economics of how many customers you are servicing in the millions, etc. That then allows you to make money, and then allows you to then scale and really be in the place where you are among really the emerging giants on the continent. So I think we must deliberately, as an ecosystem, begin to enter into preferential agreements, begin to enter into strategic collaborations, etc., which then seeks to address really direct customer needs. And there are so many within the various aspects of the tech ecosystem that we need to pool resources and really then take on the challenges really well. I think a really important exogenous risk that the tech ecosystem goes through here, it's really from the impact of the shocks of the economy, right? You can imagine for a lot of Ghanaian-based businesses that today are having to pay their infrastructure in dollars while servicing customers and earning CDs. It essentially means you're working twice as hard as you were last year just to potentially survive. So I think those shocks are quite severe and are the heart of really hindering our growth, etc. At the same time, for our market size, in one breath, you see complexities or opportunities in terms of regulatory moves that then is opening up the market, etc. Because increasingly, the tech ecosystem is playing a really important role, a last mile, in bringing proper comfort to the millions of people that are feeling this exogenous impact as severely as the tech ecosystem is undergoing. So there's a lot of just really deliberate back to basics and ensuring that a few of our brilliant basics are aligned around maturing our processes, understanding our customer data better, and also then being, I guess, a bit more deliberate around leveraging really cutting edge technology to allow us to go fast in the midst of these exogenous shocks that increasingly then impact suddenly sometimes or incrementally over time the progress we are making as the tech ecosystem, and generally just scaling and getting to a more higher level of maturity than we are at the moment.
Okay, great. Thank you. To you, Mr. Stevens, I want us to discuss the workforce, right? Or the workforce readiness. How can Ghana better prepare its workforce for a digital economy? We've heard that a lot about transforming this into a huge digital economy. And what role do you think the public and private sectors can play in this transition if we are to prepare our workforce for a digital economy?
Right. And so that's actually a very interesting question. And I mean, as you were talking, the economists in me kept wondering, well, when we say the workforce, are we still, using a brick and mortar definition of what the workforce is? Then the lawyer in me is equally thinking, okay, what will be the implications of the definitions we will use, from an economic standpoint, and how does that shape policy? Because there's implications for it, and I say that because not too long ago, this is just for a little bit of a background context. Some people decided to take one of these ride-hailing apps to one of the circuit courts, and a very interesting judgment was delivered. In order not to bore anybody with the legalese, the effect of the judgment really is that if you are an Uber or if you are Bolt or Lyft or any of these other ride-hailing apps, which really is at the center of what's happening in the digital economy, you are an independent contractor. Okay, effectively that is what it means. By independent contractor, what it means is that, I mean, in simple terms, you don't have social protection for the job that you do. Okay, so compared to somebody who will work in the traditional sector, if, for example, if you choose to drive if you choose to play a part in, say, driving an Uber or whatnot, and that puts you in the digital economy somewhat, because you're rendering a service that's been developed or deployed off of a certain, algorithm, and somebody else benefiting off the back of that. If you choose to do that, as against, say, driving for STC or driving for some other, private, transport service provider, you've got some social security that is provided from an employment standpoint. If this decision effectively means you're not, right? So you have to take care of this. These things, when it looks simple, but they go to the heart of defining what truly can be done from a policy standpoint for the labor market. So the idea that, why don't we churn out a lot of skills and a lot of people to just, who are capacity and skill set to either build apps or understand how the value chains are working and plug it. We must equally be very sensitive of how the digital economy is altering not only our lives, but altering our understanding of the way the world of work looks like, and what that means for legislation and policy making. And I think that's the very first point on today, right? That we must keep up to the times. The point really is that the economy has evolved. Whether we like it or not, the digital economy is going to change and upset and disrupt a lot of things from the way we understand them. And one of those things is going to be what it means to work for an institution and what it means to be an independent contractor. If you're sitting at home and by virtue of any of these conferencing platforms or collaborative work platforms, you're working remotely, it's very important for the policymaker to imagine what that relationship is evolving to look like and whether it can give you the protection that you want as an employee vis-a-vis being an independent contractor. Whichever way, you've got a job. But I'm saying long term, those jobs have got security implications that need to be provided for. That's the first thing. The second thing is the death of the skill gap. I mean, somebody may have said, Ghana, when we think of, job creation, or when we think of, doing business, perhaps the most binding constraint is access to finance. I mean, when I've had the opportunity of looking and speaking to different industry leaders, one of the major challenges is really getting qualified and up to task, labor force, and that has been a major challenge. So perhaps from a policy standpoint, when we think of the labor market or labor force, one of the things we can start doing is finding those levers that enable people to better acquire the digital skills that they need, the relevant digital skills, not learning how to type with Microsoft Word. I mean, you see kids go to school today, people are learning, I mean, the basics are important, But I'm saying the economy has gotten to a point, I mean, some of the things we have to leapfrog them now to actually getting people to not only consume technology, you're thinking of skills that help them either build or optimize technology in a point to solve the solution, not just randomly sitting on the consumption end. And the reality is that in Africa and in Ghana, the capacity exists to do some of that without being, sitting on the consuming end. So that's the other thing we have to perhaps think about very well. When you do that, I think what is happening at a college level, pre-college level education, so senior high schools, for example, we tend to leave things around technology innovation. We treat them as these side events. So there's some tech and innovation competition. It's just a secluded class of students who have an interest in tech and innovation that then going to take part in some competition, and off the back of that, they can come up with some innovation that gives them the tools that they can to properly play in the ecosystem. I'm thinking that perhaps we have to start thinking, reimagining that differently, right? That it's got to be embedded in the modules that are actually being deployed, for delivering teaching and learning all across. So the kids are a bit more attuned to it. We see this happening in some of the Asian countries. There's no reason why it cannot happen here. Then we're going to have questions around, tools, scalability, deployment, what have we got access to, energy, internet, etc. Those are some of the infrastructure questions I tried to, point or avert our minds to earlier. All right. Again, on the subject of skill and development, there's a student institution versus industry gap. That, to my mind, equally needs to be fixed. There's one thing to say that the institution is set up, the institution that's tuned to the needs of the digital economy and has created modules that actually make that possible. There's a completely different thing to say the industry is taken this way. I'm sure if you ask Mr. Quantum, who's right smack in the middle of building financial technology, if you ask him what he wants from maybe a young computer science grad, it's perhaps not a guy who spent 4 years learning how to write computer code, right? The skill he's looking for perhaps is a skill that can be learned from, some innovation, have 6 months, a year. That's really solving a real market problem. Why spend 5, 6 years in a college and not be able to apply those skill sets? And I think that when the EdTech solutions were taking up, this is one of the bottlenecks they aim to sort of bridge. That we need these skill sets. These innovators are coming up, and the way we are going to provide that is to short circuit what has become, I don't want to call any program people are getting in college are useless, but they become a bit burdensome because when the people graduate, they become underemployed anyway. You do 6 years to get an MPhil and you're studying a particular course that you don't tend to apply that in the real marketplace. Why waste those 6 years and then later come through an innovation program from Nest or any of the innovation hubs before you can go to Mr. Quantum for a job that matters? You see what I'm saying? So it's one thing to bridge a gap between the student in terms of the skill set and what the educational institution is doing. It's a completely different thing if you're thinking about how that skill set is relevant to the industry. The final thing I'll say off the back of that is our ability to track both the demand and supply side of the labor market. We don't have that data system. We don't know. And the first thing we say in policy is if it matters, you should be able to measure it. If you're not measuring it, it doesn't matter to you, right? So we have to, develop the system that gives us that adequate data point that tells what sort of skill sets are needed by the innovator in the ecosystem. What are the features and characteristics of these skill sets? Do we have them? What is happening on the supply side? Are there gaps? Where are the gaps? And track that over time so that you can at least address those needs, as those needs evolve. Finally, will be, and I don't know if this may be pertaining to only the Ghanaian market, but the idea that for the purposes of acquiring relevant skills that are useful for this market, the argument that has been made is that perhaps brick and mortar and sitting 4 years or 5 years or 6 years in a particular institution may not necessarily matter. It's a controversial argument to make, but we have to fine-tune that in a manner that makes it easy for a policymaker to take an action. We have all these MOOC programs that, over time, and again, that's also the digital economy delivering that, right? Because those are tech solutions. that are delivering content to young people in a manner that the brick and mortar 4-year classroom couldn't deliver. So you have a young man who never really had the resources to pay college level education, but with $20 or $30, you can get a certification on a Google program or some other program, and right there, that's a skill that's applied in industry, right? You have cut down the cost and you have cut down the time period required to acquiring the skill anyway, and you can do something that is really solving a problem for a business person. Is it to say that that's more valuable compared to what we traditionally do in, as far as building the capable labor force is concerned? I'm not sure that's the answer, but I'm only saying that something interesting seems to be happening with EdTech solutions and the tooling of our labor force, some of which I think have found their way into government programs. So if you look at a model developed by, for example, the NEIP in partnership with maybe UNDP and others, you see that thinking, carrying in there. My only challenge is somehow we wait for the people to go through 4-year college education, then we say we transfer them in there. That's not going to work. If you need it to be very agile, then if you've done the 2 or 3 things I talked about earlier, you don't need this long cut. And what will that mean for policymakers in education? They got to think innovatively and think in line with industry, right? So these perhaps would be my reflections on what we can do to not only retool, but unlock human capital in the labor market in a manner that is useful for the digital economy, but can equally benefit from the digital economy.
Okay, great. Interesting insights there, particularly relating to the skill sets gaps. And it's something that we've noticed, particularly here at the Global Startup System, where we have accelerator programs for the youth to build them or to just get them within the tech space. What we've noticed over the years in trying to help people was couldn't get people, even though they've done certain skills like within the computer science and other aspects in the university for 4 years, they still didn't have the right skill sets that we needed. So we had to then retrain them for them to be able to work within our organization. So it's something that I do agree with. It's something that has to be looked at as with all stakeholders involved within the educational sector as well, for whether the schools have to then now approach some of these organizations to tailor some courses. It doesn't have to be a 4-year course. It could be short ones like we have online as well, because that's what the youth are now going into. They are going into, you mentioned that as well, they are going into online courses that they can pay and get certification for to enable them get some skills that they can get work done globally or get attached to some placements globally. So it's something that needs to be looked at within the sector as well. So thank you for mentioning that.
No, it's very, very useful. Just to add something quickly. So I've seen in some countries, and perhaps this is what I'm thinking about, I think was in Oregon. So the Oregon State University, for example, so somebody who figured out how to, it worked years with Nike, right? So somebody who creates, so it's like a designer who designs footwear, right? And he uses these digital tools, gets the students locked in. He piloted this. And for some reason, the students who were in some of the design schools just loved the idea. So rather than going to sit and let design and spend the 4 years in college and design, they sort of understood what he was doing. So the Oregon State University, for example, just decided, you know what, it makes sense to deploy this. So rather than go through 4-year program, they just developed these programs that innovator came to deliver. So if you have somebody who studied design and some part of engineering or design or whatnot in any of their traditional universities, but the skill set that you guys are delivering is useful and relevant and you understand the market better, rather than say we have come to add you to another course that is labor intensive, you just come and deliver just that module. So if you're there for 4 weeks, 2 weeks, and you deliver that model that's quick, hands-on, that delivers a solution, the educational institution needs to play ball. They need to understand that. But that's the kind of thinking that I'm sort of alluding to when I think of the individual, the institution, and what the digital economy may need. So thanks for those reflections. That was just an example.
Yeah, thank you. I do agree with that. And back to you, Mr. Quantin. I know you've also experienced that as well. You're also in the industry, so you know as well. And I'm sure you'll be able to share some lessons from Cowrie's growth, because we've seen your growth within the industry. I'm sure in sharing your growth, it could help other startups and businesses thrive within this digital sector. So can you share some lessons from Cowrie's growth that could help startups and businesses thrive within Ghana's digital sector?
Thank you for that. I'm going to attempt to sum up 19 years of struggle in 2 minutes. So I hope people are paying attention. But yeah, I think to the point that you guys have made, digital skills is a huge growing risk. Okay, and I want to qualify it as risk for the industry generally. Even though you are seeing a proliferation of private universities and tech hubs and all these other things that are positive, at the core of it, we are seeing a rapid decline of resilient workers who are able to pivot as many times are required for you to survive in this really sometimes aggressive sea of tech industry in the country. So digital skills is a struggle, and the whole country needs to pay attention, because it's going to blow over at some point if we don't think about it constructively. Okay, but I think key lessons for me is, look, if you're in the tech business and you're listening to this, be prepared to pivot as many times as is required for you to find your sweet spot. Okay, because oftentimes your initial thesis really around how you're making money, how you're attracting customers, never really works out. So you must be resilient to pay attention long enough to your customer data, to relevant market indicators like policy, competition, etc., for you to be able to pivot. Because if you don't pivot and pivot in the right direction, you will struggle to survive as long as we have in the tech ecosystem. So that's really key. Okay. I've spoken a little bit about data, but I think if you're in the tech industry today, given where generally technology is going on the back of AI and all these other things, and Gen AI specifically, if you're not paying attention to data, your internal data, simple things as, customer errors and what that potentially means in terms of business opportunities and new product opportunities. If you don't pay attention to data around your finances, especially, a lot of the tech players have burning cash way runway issues, really massive issues. So you must pay attention to your data, especially your customer data and your internally generated data, to allow you to address the first point of pivoting aggressively. I also spoke about resilience, and resilience is in a number of ways. You must learn how to stay relevant. The pace at which technology is evolving, if you are not able to reconfigure yourself to stay relevant within each change or each inflection point, then you'll be eating up a bit more aggressively than you intend to. So you find that we started off as a technology company, moved into tech consultancy. We are fintech, and we're very early days into a digital bank. That's really paying attention, if you will, to the convergence in financial services and aiming to stay relevant all the time. Okay. I think what's also very important, if you take away from the flowery narration sometimes around technology and innovation, is that you must learn how to foundation right. Nothing is sustainable if you don't foundation right. Just like it is logical that if you don't foundation right, you can't build a house, right? And foundation blocks around team building, foundation blocks around organizational culture, embracing things like agility deep in your organizational culture are extremely important. Okay. Having very strong governance. And I know sometimes people confuse strong governance as a negative thing in moving fast with innovation. But if you're paying attention closely to the ecosystem, corporate governance is really at the heart of being able to sustain your business long enough. Having the right advisors, having the right board, setting the right risk forums to provide the guardrails technology properly are central to surviving over 19 years like we have, because without governance, things really can go south really, really quickly. Okay. I think what's also very key is that you must, within the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is massive if we look at it from a helicopter view. Within the ecosystem, you must find the right partnerships. You must build your own village of the right partnerships that allow you to compete as opposed to compete all the time, in collaborating around things like risk, data sharing, cost sharing, and all these other elements that you get economies of scale coming together. You must also have the right partnerships that then allow you to go into other segments that perhaps you're not licensed to. So, for example, on Kari, because we're not an insurance company, we've partnered an insurance company to provide insurance, and all these other deep partnerships that we continue to do. You must find the right partnerships for you to then build depth on your business case, because you will not survive on a single strand revenue line in your business case for 19 years unless you're doing something really, really foundationally groundbreaking. So that's really, really important. And then I think finally you must have a social impact. As they say, no tree eats its fruit, right? So I think if your business is in Ghana, then you must think of ways that your technology helps your community without necessarily thinking about money right away. So I think that goodwill sustains you over time when you are providing deep impact within your community around scaling, tooling, and just providing relevant data to keep that whole community together. Because the more your community understands and consumes technology, the more you can sell really around that community. So these are perhaps the 7 or so items that I think are foundational to staying relevant and surviving this sometimes really tough ecosystem. I'll go over it again. You must pivot aggressively. You must pay attention to data, especially your customer data and internal data. You must exhibit resilience in staying relevant. You must foundation right, put governance on top and center in terms of the way you are innovating. And then you must have a deep social impact in whatever technological end and solution you're solving. Because the money is really in helping people and empowering people in your own community. So I'll leave it here at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Patrick Quantin. It's been an amazing discussion, and I really want to thank you both for your insights you shared. It's been transformative. I believe those who have tuned in are learning a lot from it and have much more to contribute as well. But we would like to wrap it up here. But before I let you go, I would like you to give any word of advice. I think Mr. Patrick has given, I think everything today has been really thought-provoking as well. So it's sums up everything in a very huge advice for industry players and anyone that's interested in it. But then before you go, I also like you to if you have any words of advice for anyone that's looking to venture into the tech space, be it an individual or an organization, you could share that as well, Mr. Stevenson.
So I guess the space, and I'm going to do this. The space has different actors. So depending on who the actor is, some advice may be relevant. If you're a business person, I think that Mr. Quantin has gone through perhaps on a very elaborate list of what you should pay attention to. Because I tend to work a lot more in policy and the broader economy, perhaps I'll speak to those actors and perhaps a business person to pay attention to what some of the regulatory developments really are. For example, like this decision that has been made by the courts that have implications for people who are developing applications that can have multiple use cases in different value chains. The kind of contracts you can get into, what those contracts will mean, legally, and whether or not that can either impact, how you are able to scale the business. I think it's a very important to watch that. Again, depending on the value chain you're getting into, think broadly of what the infrastructure needs of that value chain really looks like. Ghana as a country, if you look at it homogeneously, opportunities exist. Don't get me wrong, right? But it is only when you actually start doing real work that you find out that as big as the opportunity may be from the outside, depending on the value chain you're going to play in, if you think of a digital economy, some places infrastructure may not be so supportive. When I think infrastructure, I'm not thinking brick and mortar. Sometimes it may be regulatory infrastructure, it may be soft infrastructure. It may be a policy decision that must change. And that again some type of infrastructure that you'd have to contend with. It will also be very important to understand the moonshot ideas of what the government itself is thinking, because that ultimately will shape the outlook of the industry, right? And fortunately, we've got a government that tends to understand to some extent that there's a lot of young people that don't have jobs, there are a lot of opportunities that the digital economy can present, but it's not clear what the pathways have got to be because people are used to doing things around the traditional economy for so long. So perhaps the policymakers, the point really will be how they use, their purchasing power, which is fairly large within the economy, to support young entrepreneurs that are doing things in the digital ecosystem, right? And not think of the digital ecosystem as this thing that will tend to address or deal with after we've dealt with other things. So it's almost to say, oh, we're trying to figure out what economic policy would be. We're interested in fiscal policy, monetary policy. Okay, what is happening with the big sectors, mining, oil and gas. Then when we finish, oh, there's something called digital economy on the side. I think that's the way we thought about it. No, every value chain has got multiple case applications of development in the digital economy. So I imagine policymakers to think from a very progressive and inclusive standpoint and get the right people that matter into the room. Get innovators into the room. It's not about finding some consultant to write a bunch of papers for you that should inform policy. Get innovators in the room. I struggle to see when I hear a conversation about cabinet, for example, and our cabinet is full of ministers, and some of them are 60, 70. I mean, do you understand how the average 18-year-old is thinking and where they want to consume information from and who the ed tech solution provider is? Probably not. So the innovators that matter, whose actions can shape our policy, I think they have to be in the room at some point. And the policymakers have to be that open. We've seen them do that for things like healthcare, where now it's easy for the likes of, I wouldn't say easy, but I mean, we're receptive of the ideas of the likes of pharma and others around the value chain. There's a lot more happening in other spaces that I think they have to be conscious of. And who knows? We stand a better chance of creating value for ourselves.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Mr. Quantin, any last words?
Yeah, look, let me keep it real. Let me keep it real for everybody. Look, if you're in the tech industry, don't give up, okay? I know it's hard, especially in these times, because, as I said, the exogenous shocks, a lot of us couldn't have even forecasted as the worst case scenario. So don't give up, okay? Dig deeper. Like I said, build the right partnerships. Make sure you're in the rooms, to Mr. Stevenson's point around lobbying for what is important for your industry, etc. Really, really key. You can't allow 65-year-olds to do the digital infrastructure for you, essentially. So dig deeper, and get into the rooms and contribute. But also look at the region as a block, as opposed to confining yourself to Ghana. Because there are wonderful things happening here that will make you money in Cote d'Ivoire, in Burkina Faso, in Togo. So transpose your ideas and your innovations across, because indeed it's one big market, essentially. So I wish you all the best, and thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Patrick Quantin, Mr. Patrick Stevenson. It was amazing having you on. Thank you for your thoughts and ideas you shared. It was really thought-provoking, and I do believe the audience agree with me. I'd like to shout out to Joshua Valdez, who's been online and also contributing as well. He says, I think most importantly is figuring out right away if users need a service and can charge as soon as you know the value. This is the way African companies can scale, but importantly, developers need to be all in. Thank you for sending that in as well. You also sent, I think, another one as well, but I think the most important thing is to quickly determine if users need a service and to charge a fee as soon as the founder provides value to customers. This approach can help African companies scale, but most importantly, developers need to be fully committed. So thank you to everyone who sent in comments as well. Because of time, I can't do that as well. And I was trying to see if there were some extra questions here, but I see none as well. But thank thank you so much to our speakers, Patrick Quanson and Patrick Stevenson, for joining us today. It's been an amazing time with both of you here, and sharing your thought leadership with us has been amazing. And we're really thankful and grateful to you all for availing yourselves for this amazing discussion. We look forward to the discussion next month as well, so stay with us on the Ghana Tech Summit Stakeholder Roundtable. We are galvanizing all stakeholders within the tech ecosystem, so you'll be seeing from your favorite personalities within that tech ecosystem as well. Thank you once again, and do enjoy the rest of your day. It's bye from me.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
All right. So we're thankful to our speakers for this discussion, and we are grateful for their time as well. It's been an amazing discussion, and we'll continue next month as well. So look out for the page on Facebook and LinkedIn as well, and also look out if you would like to get involved as well. You could send a message to the team via programs@globalstartupfoundation.com. It's been me, Stanotete, from Ghana Tech Summit and the Global Startup Ecosystem. And do enjoy the rest of your day. See you next for the next edition next month as well, where we'll introduce other stakeholders to join us in the discussion as well. If you'd like to get involved, like I said, just reach out to us as well. But do enjoy the rest of your day.
Hi, I am Anne Rosenberg, Senior Vice President of SAP NextGen. We are in Accra in Ghana, where we are launching the first huge Ghana Africa Futures Tech Hub.
First and foremost, let me give you an overview of what Ghana Tech Summit is. This is a 12-year initiative that we're going to be doing every single year until 2030. And we started it today with a bold initiative, with 100 global speakers for the next 2 days, 1,000 attendees. Some of them will be coming on African time, and it's okay, right?
The energy is incredible out here. People are excited. There's a lot of galvanization towards the same goal. And I think what's very interesting is how the diaspora from other countries have come back to Ghana to plow back and develop the ecosystem.
Meeting a lot of great entrepreneurs, a lot of great companies, and learning about what technology and advancement in Ghana looks like.
Well, we have incredible minds. They say that Ghanaian migrants are some of the most sharpest people across the US and the UK, and thus when that happens we can actually have accelerated growth. So with that, Ghana could actually become one of the dominant tech hubs in Africa in the next 5-10 years.
We have to reach the 17 global goals by 2030. It means that every day we drive innovation. It means that companies are opening up, building joint innovation labs with collaboration between accelerator, academia, and the industry and the public sector.
One of the big conversations there was blockchain and AI, and we're literally sitting right here in Accra, where Google is going to be opening their AI office, and I think that for me that is the immediate link. These are technologies that could possibly help us eradicate poverty, eradicate malaria, eradicate all sorts of issues that we're still dealing with as a developing nation. So for me, I think that that's what's exciting about this.
So one thing is for sure, we're doing history here. This is the first summit in Ghana on tech, and it's going to be many more to come. So if you miss it this year, we hope to see you next year. Don't forget, Cannes Lions first, and then we go to Ghana Tech Summit.